President Trump's big, beautiful bill has landed in the Senate. Republicans are eyeing July 4th to get it to the president's desk, but some are balking over ballooning debt. Leading the charge is Senator Ron Johnson, who wants to see more spending cuts in the package.
I think we have enough to stop the process until the president gets serious about spending reduction and reducing the deficit.
President Trump has said he's open to modifying the House's bill, but Speaker Mike Johnson wants minimal changes, warning he's already struck a delicate balance to get it through the House. Okay, so Daniel, I understand Speaker Johnson's viewpoint. He had to herd a lot of cats over the past many months to get this bill done. But I think Ron Johnson is making a pretty compelling case that if this is going to be a beautiful bill, it needs to be bigger on the spending cut side.
Yeah, we have a really big problem, though, because we have DOGE, which is one of the most popular things that's happened in America in a long time within the voters. But at the same time, you're seeing nothing happen in terms of, making this a permanent state going forward. We have cuts being made and people don't want them. You have the right side and the left side, by the way. This isn't even partisan. So I understand what Senator Ron Johnson wants, but I also understand the juxtaposition of the speaker. He barely has a majority to push this through in the House. They start going back and changing their direction right now. I don't know if they get anywhere. And then what happens if these tax cuts lapse? And then you have an even bigger problem come the midterms.
So, Taylor, I know that you're not a fan of the ratio argument. You just want to see raw root canal spending cuts. I don't think that happens unless President Trump comes in and muscles that with Speaker Johnson in the House. Do you see this happening? Do you see deeper cuts coming from the Senate?
I know this is where, what did I use with Larry Kudlow? The 5-4 split Supreme Court decision argument, right? Where the majority argues and it sounds so good that I agree with them. And then the 4 members on the dissent argue and it sounds so good that I agree with that decision too. So I understand that we're in this moment where we need the tax cuts. You cannot let those expire. Don't let perfect get in the way of good. If this is good enough, let's do it. The other part of me, Brian, is like, I don't go to the polls hoping that debt to GDP ratio goes down because GDP, the denominator, gets bigger. I go to the polls because I voted for literally a cut in spending, not a slowing of the growth in spending, literally slashing spending. So that's where I think this is literally, for me, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. When is the next time, do you think, when you can get a president and a Congress and voters to give them the political will and the political capital to cut spending and tackle the debt? This moment to me is so precious, and it could go away in 18 months at the next midterms, that I'm sort of on the side of like, screw the midterms. Let's do it and do it now, because I don't know when I'm ever going to get this moment again. And I could be convinced in either way, but I voted for a cut in spending.
Well, Dagan, in the Senate, you've got some folks who want more cuts. Ron Johnson, Rand Paul's another one. But
Rand's issue, though, is the debt ceiling. That's his
he doesn't like that. No, I agree with you on that. But he said he'd go along with what he calls anemic cuts on that point. But complicating things in the Senate is you've also got, and I'm saying this particularly to you, the Josh Hawley wing. I don't know, maybe he's the only guy in that wing that's actually looking to go the other direction on this, sparing cuts to Medicaid. So take yourself a big gulp of water and then sort through that one for me.
Not a cut, Josh. We're just slowing the spending growth in Medicaid, and not enough. So we're just slowing spending growth in Medicaid to $1 trillion in growth over the next decade. Medicaid should not be Medicaid for all. And that's what you want it to become. You want it to become socialized health insurance and health care, because that's where we're headed. There's no reason that Medicaid should have grown faster than other entitlements. And that's what it's become. And there's no reason it's growing faster than Social Security and Medicare. And it's also, why is it that the Obamacare Medicaid expansion pays $9 for every $1 in state spend versus $1.33 for just that's paid for the blind, the disabled, pregnant women. That is wrong. And it violates the very essence of what Medicaid is supposed to do. One thing I will point out, it does remain to be seen. There are some people, I think Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, are not in favor of deeper Medicaid cuts. I just want to make a point, and the scoring of these bills is not great sometimes, but the Penn Wharton budget score I think it came out late Friday, the dynamic score, which assumes changes it doesn't just look at a static economy, but changes to the economy based on the bill. The dynamic score is worse for the big, beautiful bill than the static score.
So they're not baking in that growth and more tax revenue from that growth.
Well, and I asked someone, so the total, it adds, the dynamic score adds more to the deficit than the static score. I asked someone, how is it that the dynamic scoring delivers a larger deficit? Quote, SALT does nothing for economic growth, the state and local tax deduction. It just is an added expense, which means more debt and more interest.
Yeah.
Okay, so can I ask you something? I had a question for you.
And so please feel free to get rid of the increase in the SALT cap, Ron Johnson.
You often make the point that Democrats stick together, Republicans fracture, and that's why they can't get things done. Are you worried that Republicans are fracturing right now in a way that could jeopardize this bill?
Very. You've got three ways that it could go. In the Senate, they could start, ripping it apart and making such drastic changes that they can't possibly pass it. You've got people who are saying we should be doing, even after all this conversation, that we should be doing this in pieces. Ultimately, they should be working together to pass it. Maybe you get from 1.6 trillion to the 2 trillion that Russ Vought is talking about, with a little bit of a delta there. I don't think you can go much further than that. Then you've got to start to rely on the growth aspect, as Taylor points out. But like Taylor, I have a lot of concerns about that. Why aren't we taking this opportunity to scale back all that expansion of entitlement spending that we saw? Because if we don't do it now, we're never going to do it. That's number one. And number two, if the growth is really going to be there the way some of the scoring says it may or may not be, and I always say that's a Hail Mary, it's really hard to predict, then we could use that money for things that are more important to us, paying down our debt and deficit, or programs, if we're in better shape in that regard, programs that we think are necessary at that time. And so I worry about this, but I also know that time is of the essence, and so that's the other aspect of this, that maybe not perfect, but good is good enough because it's got to be done now.
Daniel,
We'll see.
Yeah, and it's a good point. And, the Larry Kudlow analysis of growth on this bill is, I think, quite a bit more rosy than the Penn Wharton analysis of growth. You're a business guy, you're a business owner. How much growth juice is in this bill?
Yeah, so my biggest concern, by the way, is this is where we're finally finding bipartisan support, and not the right kind of support. And what do I mean by that? Well, basically, we're seeing politicians on the left and the right that are all basically banding against the waste, abuse, and fraud. And you see Elon Musk going out on social and basically waving the white flag and saying, I tried. I brought $165 billion so far, and we've been unable to codify this. We've been unable to find any agreement in Congress to actually make sure that we continue this process. So Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said, we're going to have to grow our way through this. And it's really sad to say this, but my gut as a business is we have to grow as an economy, we have to grow business to get through this, because basically there is no willingness. So we can sit here and talk about this all day long, but there is no willingness with our current elected to actually represent the will of the people. The people want cuts, the people want DOGE. They voted for it and they've supported it. But the bill basically says we're not willing to make the cuts and maybe take away some entitlements and other spending in our districts, so maybe yours.
Yeah, there's a bureaucracy and a judiciary that does not always, sometimes it's not supposed to, but it definitely doesn't reflect the will of the people.